Y bueno, yo les quiero presentar a Chris Schalk. Él nos va a dar la plática sobre construyendo aplicaciones en la plataforma Google Cloud. Como pueden ver en la pantalla, bueno, está un poquito su biografía. Él es un Developer Advocate en Google, incorpora a las comunidades desarrolladoras en la nube, tanto con el motor de Google Apps como con otras tecnologías de Google NUBE. Chris se unió a Google en el 2007 y ha trabajado en varias tecnologías de Google, incluyendo Open Social, Maps y Ajax APIs. Antes de Google, Chris era gerente principal del producto de Oracle en el grupo de desarrollo de herramientas y coautor de Java Server Faces de Complete Reference. Los dejo con Chris, muchísimas gracias.
¿Me escuchas? Hola. Hello, testing, 1, 2, 3. Hola, buen día. Hola, voy a hablar casi totalmente en inglés, pero si quieres yo puedo contestar en español si quieres, si estás más cómodo preguntando en español. Y es obvio que yo es mucho más fácil para mí para hablar en inglés para presentar. ¿Está bien? Okay. Muy bien. Entonces voy a sacar una foto. Okay, you guys come over here. No. Okay, there we go. Ta-da! Perfecto. I'll put that on Google Plus. So, all right. I'll take a picture after and just see how you guys are doing. Make sure you guys are awake. So, welcome to my presentation. Don't worry, I have plenty of time for this presentation. It's a little bit shorter. How many here were in the earlier presentation that I gave? Oh, okay. Okay, so a good number of people. So basically what I'm going to be talking about for this presentation is the overall set of cloud technologies that Google provides, in addition to just App Engine. So I'll be talking a little bit about App Engine, but also the complementary technologies that make up an overall family of technologies that make up essentially what people consider as the platform for Google Cloud Computing. So this is my agenda, essentially describing the overall set of cloud technologies that Google provides. I will provide a little bit of a App Engine recap, so just a bit of a review for people who didn't attend my earlier talk, and then also if there are people who are new to App Engine, I just want to make sure that you fully understand what App Engine is. And then after that, we'll dive into the newer technologies. Specifically, I'll be covering Google Storage, and then the Prediction API, as well as BigQuery. And so these are all fairly new technologies, and they complement App Engine quite nicely. And then, of course, we'll finish up with some demos. I'll be showing you how to use all of these different technologies together, as well as, and then we'll do questions and answers. Okay, so first of all, as you can see, App Engine has been the original cloud web development or cloud technology for building applications since 2008. In my earlier talk, I kind of gave a history, but essentially it's meant to provide a simple access to the infrastructure of Google via a set of services. So these services allow you to tap into the existing core infrastructure technologies that Google has. Because, for example, Google has the search. Google has, various other technologies like Google Maps and the Google Docs and Google Apps. They all use a core set of internal technologies, but App Engine is really neat because it allows external people, outside people, to use App Engine's various services and APIs to tap in and use those same technologies. So it's essentially sharing the incredibly powerful and rich technologies out to the external public. Now, App Engine, as I mentioned, was introduced back in 2008, and it has grown quite significantly over the last few years. There's over 100,000 applications, or 200,000 applications, 100,000 developers, and over 1.5 billion page views of applications. So these are applications that are constantly getting traffic on a daily basis. These new technologies are relatively new. They've been, to a certain degree, been available in trusted tester mode, meaning like we provide like early adopters, they'll get a special account and they provide feedback. And we incorporate their feedback into the technology before we officially launch it. So we had Google Prediction API, we had Google Storage, and we still have the Google BigQuery technology in trusted tester mode. Google Storage and Prediction API are now becoming, or essentially were as of Google I/O in last May, are essentially available now for general use. Okay, so my main goal is to kind of give you a overview of all of the different technologies and what are their key strengths and how they can actually work together. And so that's why I have the lines drawn where you can see Google Storage is essentially providing like a foundational storage capacity for the other cloud technologies. And then as you can see, there's Google BigQuery or Google Prediction API that resides on top of Google Storage. And then of course, App Engine can make use of all of those technologies on their own. And so it's up to the application developer to decide how they may want to use the different cloud technologies. Okay? So let's talk about App Engine again. For the folks who did not attend my earlier talk or who are just starting or haven't actually tried out App Engine. So App Engine itself is a cloud development kit in a box. So this contains, well, it's a downloadable SDK. So you go to the website code.google.com/App Engine, and you can read the documentation, you can download an SDK, a software development kit, locally on your machine. You can create an application, whether you can use Python or Java. You can create and test your application locally. And then you can, once you're satisfied that the application runs locally in your test environment, you can then deploy it to the cloud. And that's actually very impressive in the sense that in just a matter of minutes, you can actually download and get the SDK running, build a simple application, and deploy it to the cloud. And at that point, you have a live application that you can publish to anyone, and they can start coming in for traffic. And the really cool thing about App Engine is that you have virtually unlimited scalability. Now, just to kind of clarify, you can scale as much as you want, but you also get a certain amount for free. So you don't even have to pay for anything to get a scalable application serving literally thousands of customers. But there is a point where you will approach a quota, and then you can enable billing, and then it's up to you to define the budget as it continues to grow. So that's a very nice environment for people who are just getting started, or startups, or people like students, or people who just want to get an application idea and put it into something that works very quickly and get it up and running. That's not to say that we only cater to very simple prototype applications, because App Engine actually has numerous customers that are servicing very sophisticated enterprise architectures using the App Engine technology. So App Engine by itself is a very flexible and multi-capacity or essentially multifaceted environment by which you can either create very simple applications or you can create very complex applications that are utilizing a number of the different services that are provided within App Engine. Okay. I think I touched on most of those points. The cloud-based dashboard is also something very important in the sense that once you deploy your application to the web or into the cloud, you can then, in a browser, open up your application and inspect how it's doing, make sure you can check the logs, you can see that there's any problems with it, you can configure things, you can, for example, turn on billing, that way you can actually pay to continue to handle more traffic. So there's a whole bunch of utilities that are available to you in this cloud-based dashboard. We refer to it as the administration console or the admin console, so it gives you full control of your application once it's deployed. And of course, you can redeploy another version on top of that. You could even create multiple versions of the same application in the cloud. So it's all very flexible. And of course, I think the main point that I want to stress is that it has built-in fault tolerance, and the load can very easily scale to very large numbers. Okay? So I mentioned these services. So this is just a sampling of the services that you can get with App Engine. So for example, Google has this storage technology. Do you know what it is? Starts with a B. Yeah, Bigtable. So Bigtable is essentially the back-end storage technology that is used to provide search results. So when you go to Google, you type in a search query and hit search, you'll get lots of data coming back. That's coming from Bigtable. There is an API that App Engine uses to interface with Bigtable. That's known as the Datastore API. And so, yeah, so basically you can use the exact same storage technology that Google Search also uses. Likewise, there's other services like Memcache. Memcache is high-speed memory cache. So basically, if you want to have something resident in memory so you can quickly produce content to a web application or web host, you can use Memcache, which taps into the same infrastructure Memcache technology that Google uses. So Google also provides, the way it's so fast, it really uses memory caching to a very high extent. It's basically loading up as much data in memory as possible. That way when you go to do a Google search, boom, you have immediate results. So that's a very useful and powerful tool as well that you have also access to within Google App Engine. The other services, I won't go into all of them, but they provide very useful services. So XMPP, for example, for chat. So if you want to build a chat application, you can use that service. Task queues. Task queues, I spoke about in my previous talk, where we're introducing even a new type of task queues known as pull queues. So basically, it's for offline processing. So it's for processing that is not within the context of a web request. So basically something that you just want to do on its own time, and it has larger quota or larger time allotted for it to do some certain processing. There's even other stuff that's new called back-end servers, which also extend upon what task queues can already do, but can run indefinitely. So anyway, this is just a very simple sample of various services that you get with App Engine. So you have a rich palette of services that are exposed to you as an App Engine developer via various APIs. And you can use these APIs in your programming to really make a lot of different types of applications that are very powerful with all these different services. So the question at the bottom, is that it? Definitely not. There are numerous other services that I'm not even talking about. Plus, there's the new cloud technologies that I'm going to talk about as well. So these new cloud or specialized cloud services are what we're going to be spending the rest of the time. Actually, I'm curious if maybe you guys want to see a demo of App Engine. One thing that I like to show just to get for people who are not familiar with App Engine before I move on to everything else is just how simple it is to build an application and deploy it to the web. So if you like, I can do that. Okay, let's do it. All right. So first of all, let's go ahead and just create something very simple. And this is Eclipse, and it's Eclipse with a special plugin. It's the Google Eclipse plugin. And I'm going to say, hola, Mexico City. Now, this plugin allows me to use Google Web Toolkit. So are you guys familiar with Google Web Toolkit? It's essentially a framework for building lightweight AJAX front-end applications. So it's pretty powerful, but I won't use it right now. I'm just going to create a very simple application. I'll click Finish. That's going to generate my project. And it should pop up here. Sorry, I have lots of different projects going on. So the main thing I want to show you is this simple application is nothing more than Mexico. There we go. How's that? Nothing more than a Java servlet. Any Java developers, Java servlets is a very foundational type of a web technology for developers on server-side Java. Let me go ahead and add a breakpoint, so that way I can show you the development lifecycle. So I'll hit the debug button, and that will launch this application locally. So it's now running specifically in my environment. And once it starts up the local server, as you can see down here, I just have to go to this host, the port. I'll just pop open a new. Oh, sorry, I had cached content. There we go. And so this is just a link it provides. And now I'm calling that servlet. And because I put a debug point and I started in debug mode, I can step through my code here. And now I'm actually debugging locally. And I can hit play. And then I get the message back here. It says, Hola, Mexico. So that's fine. I've created an application locally. But now let's take it and deploy it to the web. So how do we do that? Well, it's very simple. I can go to appengine.google.com. And I can use an existing application. So these are all of my applications that I've created. Because I work at Google, I do have a few extra ones, but typically you'll just have like 10 for starters. So I can create a brand new application. So I could say, Hola, Mexico. Apparently it's not available. But I could say Esto es Google or something like that. That one might be available. So it is, oh well, whatever. It doesn't matter. So this one is available, but I'm not going to use it. I'll just go ahead and take an existing application. So I'll go back here. And this is one of the applications that I use, Schalk-app. And I'm going to, so pretend I created a brand new empty application called Schalk, my last name, -app. And so now what I can do is go back here. Let me switch back to the Java mode. And I can set a, if I can find it here. There we go. App Engine settings. The application ID. And this is what associates my local application to the one that I've created in the cloud. So by doing this, I will click OK. So now, and in case you're curious, all that does is that creates an entry in this App Engine web XML and places it right there, Schalk-app. So now I'm ready to deploy the application. So I've tested it, it works great, and let's go ahead and deploy it. So now I can click on this little deploy App Engine project, and it's saying, okay, I'm going to deploy this particular project. And so it compiles everything, make sure it's happy, and then it's sending up the application into the cloud. And so while that's doing that, I'm going to open up the dashboard. So this is the cloud-based dashboard that I referred to before. So I can see all of the log information. I can see a lot of different information. Now actually what we're looking at is the previous application that I had on top of it, but I'm actually taking a brand new application. So I'm going to have new data essentially. But one of the things that I'm going to do is pull up the URL for this application, which happens to be Schalk-app.appspot.com. And that's my application right there. It's running, and then basically that's the little message right there, which you see. So as you can see here, it's live on the internet and anyone can go to that web application and see it. So that's a real simple demo of how you can build an application in App Engine. Now of course, I used Java. You can also do the same thing in Python. I won't do it right now, but if you're a Python developer, you can download this Google App Engine Launcher, which is a nice little utility that plugs onto the SDK. And I can say Mexico, like that. And I can actually create a brand new application just as I did before. Let me just create a subdirectory. So now I have a very simple starter application, and I can even run it locally. And once I get the green light, now it's running, and I can browse it. So there's my hello world. So that's the Python version of the same application. So, okay. So anyway, so that's that. So let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about some of the other cloud technologies. So these technologies, as I mentioned before, Google Storage. How many people here have heard of Google Storage? Okay, so a few of you. What Google Storage is, very simply, is a very, I would say, highly scalable, highly capable technology for storing any kind of data in the cloud. If you're familiar with some other storage technologies, like for example Amazon S3, you'll exactly know what Google Storage is because it's very similar. Prediction API. Prediction API is a very fun technology. It's machine learning technology in the sense that you can train it to observe patterns, and then later on you can provide an input, and then based on what you've trained it, it can then recognize what this input makes sense. So I have a simple example that explains how the prediction API can predict what language you're entering with a bit of text. But there's other examples that many people are coming up with. BigQuery is a highly scalable, large data technology for doing analysis. So it's basically large ad hoc query analysis. So if you have thousands or gigabytes or terabytes of data, you can actually create your own data table within BigQuery and use a lightweight SQL query language to pull up data very quickly based off of extremely large data sets. So this is good for like analysis of, for example, scientific data, financial data, large data sets that you just need quick access. And so BigQuery is a low foundational technology that you can build an application on top of to take use of that. Now SQL Service, this is another technology that I won't go into very much, but I figure I might as well mention it because it is currently under a Trusted Tester program. So we have some people who are trying it out, but we don't have a date yet by which it will be fully available. But it's basically a SQL database in the cloud. Whereas App Engine has the Datastore, which is a non-SQL database. So App Engine's Datastore can scale very quickly, but it does not have the capacity to do SQL joins. So this is MySQL compatible SQL service that will be coming eventually, but right now it's in Trusted Tester mode. Okay. So let's talk about Google Storage for developers. So Google Storage, as I mentioned before, allows you to store any data into Google's cloud. Any data format, any amount, very large amounts, anytime. And then, of course, once you have the data, you have complete control over how to access the data. You can be private, you can share it within a small group of people, or make it completely public. It's entirely up to you. You can also access Google Storage via Google APIs, which actually implement RESTful interface, or you can use third-party tools and libraries that also speak the same RESTful interface. So basically, the way you interact with Google Storage is through a RESTful interface across the board. So what are some sample use cases? Really could be anything. You could have image hosting. For example, we have some very large image data sets that we're now using Google Storage on, which you can probably guess what they're for. Music, video. Some of our early adopters last year were providing lots of video content on the Google Storage, and they were very happy with the performance. Of course, backup. If you need to back up large data, Google Storage would be fine. Sharing, that's one of the inherent features. Yeah, and just any kind of data storage for really any kind of web application, whether it be a mobile application, games, or mobile, social, doesn't really matter. You can store as a back-end any kind of data. And of course, importantly, Google Storage serves as a foundational storage layer for other technologies. So for BigQuery or Prediction API, the first step you do is you put some data in Google Storage, and then you can use these higher level APIs such as Prediction API and BigQuery to use that. Okay. What are the benefits? Well, Google, because the infrastructure is quite widespread and it's around the world, has very good performance and scalability. So you have that built-in high-performance scalability working for you already. It's also got very strong security and privacy, so you can control exactly who's accessing your data. And it's also very easy to use. You can use simple command line tools, or you can use third-party libraries and tools to interact with the data. So what are some of the technical details? Well, as I mentioned, Google Storage is a RESTful API. So you communicate with it via HTTP GETs, PUTs, POSTs, and so forth. And so all the resources are identified by a URI, essentially the internet address for any kind of content you have. Now, also very importantly is that it's API compatible with Amazon S3. So this means that if you have existing technology using Amazon S3, you could very easily take that same data, put it in Google Storage, and use the same interface via S3 API to talk to that same data. So that's actually quite helpful in that regard. And then there's buckets. Buckets are basically how you define like your data, and then objects which go inside the buckets directly. I got to check my time. I don't want to go too far. How late are we going to again? Yeah, 15:20. Okay, cool. We have 20 minutes. Awesome. So anyway, so I think I got most of that stuff there. You can, oh yeah, authentication is important. I'll show you how that works. You can either do it using access keys or web browser login, and it supports OAuth 2, if you're curious. OAuth 1 and OAuth 2 is supported. Okay. Yeah, so here we go, a little bit more data. Key-based authentication. There's a step that you go through to obtain a key, and then once you have that key, you can encode that into your requests, and then from then on, you are granted access to your code. That's assuming you have secured access, because you can always publish content and make it available to anyone if you wanted to. And of course, you can share content. You can allow other people to access it, so you can control exactly who's accessing your data. Okay, and then buckets and objects, basically these are the data, where you put the data, and you can define your own bucket or container of data as you like. Okay. So I'll do a demo here explaining how to use some of the simple tools. So let me just get started very quickly. The first thing I like to do is explain where you start initially. Let's see, I'll go for this one. Storage. So, and don't worry, I'll make sure the slides are available afterwards, so all of the URLs, all of the locations that I'm going to, you'll know where to go. But basically, if you want to get started with Google Storage for developers, this is where you would go. You can click on the Activate Google Storage, and that will step you through the process by which you can actually create a project that will use Google Storage. And I'll show you how that works. It's actually pretty cool. So there's this new thing called the APIs console. So the APIs console allows you to define a project in the cloud. And actually, let's just go ahead and do that. I'll create a new Esto S Google project. And all this really is allows me to select various cloud services. And as you can see, there's a lot more than just the simple ones that I mentioned before, or the broad ones. But so these are all different services that I can turn on for this particular project. So for starters, I can pull up the storage one. There it is. So Google Storage. So I want to use Google Storage. And I can even check the pricing, because Google Storage does provide I think I have a slide that talks about it, a free trial usage. But I also have to provide some billing information. And then once the trial period is up, I do need to set up a billing capability so I can pay for the usage. Okay, so that's my initial storage. Later on, I'll go ahead and I'll turn on Prediction API just to show you how that works. So my storage is pretty straightforward. Storage access, as you can see, it uses a RESTful API. There's also a command line tool. Let me click on that just so you know what it is. It's called GSUtil tool, so Google Storage Utility Tool. I've already gone through the process of installing it, so let me show you what that looks like. So actually, I'll just use this previous. So I have GSUtil locally. And so if I give it right now, it's just saying, giving me the usage. There we go. Let me go ahead and clear it. So now I can say GSUtil ls, like the Unix command, and I can say, so this is something I did before. I created a bucket, oops, sorry, GSUtil, I forgot how to do a command. So there we go. There's my, my various technologies. So in this case, oh, I had a typo. GSUtil ls gs : // -dev fest. So this will list the contents of the files that I have in my storage. And I created a bucket called Schalk-devfest. I did that beforehand. And here I have just various data files, so comma-separated value files. And these are important, so later on I can use them in the prediction API. So this GSUtil, it's pretty straightforward. I can do CP if I want to copy files. So if I want to copy from a local file out to the cloud, I can do something like that. del/L. I think that's correct. Yeah, I tend not to use the command line utility that much, but as you can see, it's fairly straightforward. I can do all the copy, command, rename, all that stuff using the command line utility. Now there is another tool available, which I can show you now when I go back. There's the online browser or Google Storage Manager. Now Google Storage Manager allows me to go in and create a, oops, is that the one for the, oh, that's right. There's nothing in here. So if I want to add some data, let me just, I could just drop in a file here for fun. So I'm literally dropping in a file, which I think I dropped it in. Oh well. Well, you get the idea. Basically, I should see a plus sign. Oh, yeah, I forgot to create a bucket. So I got to create a bucket, Esto, Google, there we go. I haven't done that in a while. Okay, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. And then I can drag and drop content. I'm going to switch projects. I'm going to go to a project that I already have here. And then I'm going to also open up the Google Storage Manager. So it has a different project ID. And as you can see here, I have my set of data. And one thing I did kind of do without telling you was that I actually went through a authentication with my GSUtil. So that's why my GSUtil had access to this bucket, because this bucket was associated with a project. And it went through an OAuth authentication step. But hopefully you understand, it's basically, it invoked the browser, I gave it access, and then I went back and I was able to use it in the command line utility. So there's my data, and I could do other things if I wanted to. Upload directly from here. I know I could just upload a file directly. Okay, so pretty straightforward stuff for Google Storage. Let me think if I was going to do anything else. No, I think that's about it. Later I'll do some stuff with the prediction API to actually use the data that I've uploaded. Okay, so Google Storage has been in development for well over 2 years or so. We've actually had internal projects within Google using storage. So storage is obviously very good with images, large amounts of data and images. So Panoramio, if you're familiar with that. Google Org for Haiti images, and so forth. Also YouTube, YouTube videos. So videos, images, anything with large data works fine with Google Storage. And plus, of course, the prediction API and Google BigQuery. Okay. Some of our early adopters, these were some partners that we worked with. They helped us as trusted testers providing feedback. And for example, United States Navy, we had them doing some interesting stuff with Google Storage. Pricing. So just as I'm wrapping up, the pricing, as I mentioned, there's a free trial quota until the end of this year. So for your first project, you get 5 gigabytes of storage. And then for uploading and downloading, you have 25 total amount of traffic, both 20 up and then I think 5 down, 20 to the Americas and the EMEA, which is us. And then, of course, there's a few other ways to measure the usage. 25,000 get and head requests, as well as 2,500 put, post, or list requests. Now, when you get into production usage, it's basically 17 cents per gigabyte per month. And that's also for the Americas as well in general. So anyway, I won't read through everything, but as you can see, there's the pricing is listed for there. It's also posted on the website as well. Okay? So I think we covered most of this. You can store any kind of data, easy to use APIs. You have the Google Storage Manager, GSUtil. There's third-party tools that you can use, JetSet, 3T, CyberDuck, Boto. There's a fairly simple use technologies that you can take care of. All right? How are we doing on time? Let's talk about the prediction API. This is actually a lot of fun. So prediction API allows you to predict outcomes based on learned patterns. So you can train Google's machine learning algorithms to observe patterns and be able to predict based off of a new input. So in this example, you could create a language predictor very easily. All you have to do is provide some examples in, say, one or many or a couple of different languages, and then when you train the model, when you train the actual prediction API, you could then start supplying bits of text in whatever language, and it could predict what it is. So this is just one example. There's numerous other examples that you could also use for prediction API. So in this example, we have English, Spanish, and these are just, as you train it, you can provide like a comma-separated value table of example, explanation, example, explanation. And then later on when you go and do the predictions, you can provide a bit of text and then it will fill in what it thinks it is. So it could say, oh, that looks like English on the top, or oh, that looks like Spanish on the bottom. So it's fairly straightforward in how it works. There's a lot of different applications that you could do this for. Customer sentiment is fairly popular, I would say. We have some projects internally that are evaluating this. So when people write in comments, you can kind of discern whether they're angry or they're happy, or whether this comment is a serious problem or something very simple. So that's something that you can do. Email filtering, any kind of other types of ways to analyze data. Okay? How do you do it? Well, it's a three-step process. First, you take your data, your model data, you upload it to Google Storage, and then you train the prediction API to observe this model data, and then once it's trained, you can make predictions on that data. Okay? So here's kind of illustrated the first step. Let's upload some data. So English example, Spanish example. You can copy GSUtilCP, the data, into your bucket, and then it's in Google Storage. And then you can train it, and that's another simple HTTP post request with the URL pointing to the data. That tells the prediction API that, hey, I need to train this data and learn how to recognize the patterns. And then you can also check on how the training is coming asynchronously, and because it will sometimes go for a few minutes, and it'll say, okay, I'm all done with the training. Or otherwise it will say, I'm still working on the training part. And then finally, when you're in operational mode, you can say, okay, I'm going to make a post to this URL, and I'm going to give it the bucket location, and I want it to predict. And I'm going to give it input data of something like that's a bit of French text. And then it will respond and say, okay, my best guess is French, but I have some other scores as well. So it could be Spanish, could be English, but I feel more confident that it's French in this case. So that's essentially how the operation works. It's via RESTful requests back and forth, and you provide the data. So this is a little bit of code in Python that essentially shows how you could do the same type of post request via a web application as opposed to command line utilities. Okay, so let me just show you how to work with the prediction API. How are we doing? Are we okay? You guys want to see the demo? So this demo is all laid out for me because I want to make sure I get it right. So first of all, I have some data that I've already loaded called languages.csv. It's in my bucket already. So now all I have to do is call a script, and I made the script so it's verbose so you can see what it's doing. So I'm calling a script that's issuing a request to train this data. So it's going to go and it says, oh, I want to train the prediction API to recognize languages.csv. All right, so that's fine. It's now training the data. Now let's check to see how we're doing. Is the data trained yet? Let's check. And so what this is doing, it's polling the prediction API and asking, are you done? And it said, nope, it's still running. So it's thinking, it's going through the data. And I can call it again. Let's check the training. Now it's done. As you can see at the bottom, it's now done. So at this point, I can then go in and make a prediction. So as you can see, I'm adding a little bit of text, and it needs to predict what that is. So I'm just using the script to make my HTTP post with my data. And then it's coming back and it says, it thinks that this is Spanish. But as you can see, it has different scores. In Spanish was 0.35. French was 0.32, so it was kind of close. So anyway, so as you can see, there's, that's more or less how the prediction API works. So pretty straightforward. I think I'm going to show one more thing on the, one more thing, just as a simple example. I have an application that I have here. Where is it? Oh, there it is. So this is a complete application that is using the JavaScript API. So there's a full set of JavaScript APIs for building an application that allows me to predict as well. So in this case, let me go ahead and pull up the browser. And so this is an application that was shown at Google I/O, but I also adapted it here. And for this one, I'm going to go ahead and give it some specific. And the way it works is that I can provide a bit of text, and then it can recognize, oh, I think that actually belongs to a certain technology called App Engine. So it provides like a tag for App Engine. And just so you can probably guess what this application or this guess is going to be, or the prediction. I'll make it predict Android, as you could guess. So basically, it's making the fetch, it's posting the data, and because it already has trained data to recognize keywords based on this stuff, it can then go back and say, oh, I think that's Android, or I think that's App Engine, and so forth. Okay? So let's go ahead and get back into our, so anyway, since we're starting to run out of time, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the next technology, and we'll take some questions fairly soon. Okay? So BigQuery is also similar to the cloud technologies, and it uses Google Storage to store the data. But in this time, you're going to actually make a SQL query to say, what is the most, you can actually query for any kind of data. And it's similar in that it's a RESTful API. You make the query using a JSON RPC and so forth. The cool thing about it is BigQuery, it's both fast and it's very simple, whereas other traditional large data processing typically are batch jobs, and they tend to be slow and complex. Also, there's many use cases. You can do them in trends detection, scientific applications, and so forth. And then there's only one more thing I want to show. The process by which you do it is very similar. You upload your data, you import it into a BigQuery table, and then you perform the SQL queries. Okay? And that's pretty much it. I won't get into all the details, but basically there's a lot of things that you can try out. You can actually do queries directly using a simple tool that you can download yourself. And let's see, I think that's roughly it. So you can actually integrate it into applications as well. So at this point, I'd like to go ahead and these set of URLs is what you can use later on to learn about storage and prediction in BigQuery. And then, of course, I'll tweak the location of the slides as well. So, muchas gracias. Do you have any questions, anyway? Any final questions? I think something up on top.
So, hi. So right now the prediction API just works on numbers and text. No, can you do predictions on other kinds of files?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I mean, we're continuously working on improving or adding extended ways to predict, but right now, different combinations of text and numbers and so forth. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Oh, I think one final question here, and then I'll be outside so I can answer more questions outside too.
En el API de la predicción, ¿uno puede definir el algoritmo para usar en el aprendizaje de máquinas o ya están fijos?
That time I didn't hear. Tal vez yo pueda hablar contigo afuera, porque es un poco difícil escuchar. Bueno, muchas gracias, y I hope you enjoyed my talk. Thank you. Thank you.